Hello viewers, welcome to the Bachelor course of Population Studies. Today, I would like to acquaint you with the topic Patterns and Trends of Urbanization through my lecture. Patterns and Trends of Urbanization. Urbanization in India began to accelerate after independence due to the country's adoption of a mixed economy, which gave rise to the development of private sector. Urbanization is taking place at a faster rate in India. Population residing in urban areas in India according to 1907 census was 11.4%. This count increased to 28.53% according to 2001 census and crossing 30% as per 2011 census, standing at 31.16%. According to a survey by UN State of the World Population Report in 2007, by 2030, 40.76% of country's population is expected to reside in urban areas. As per World Bank, India, along with China, Indonesia, Nigeria and United States, will lead to world's urban population surge by 2050. It is since World War II that urbanization has been so rapid that it has attracted the attention of both the developing and the world because of social, economic and environmental problems it creates. However, the process of urbanization and the nature of problems in developing and developed countries are not similar, while in the context of the developed countries, urbanization and city growth are essential conditions for industrialization and modernization. It has become a threat to better living in the developing countries because of the explosive growth of cities, particularly a few megacities. In this connection, Salus compared urbanization of today with the experience of Western Europe and concludes that it has become a problem, a burden on the back of development. Also, within India, Mumbai saw large-scale rural-urban migration in the 21st century. Mumbai accommodates 12.5 million people and is the largest metropolis by population in India, followed by Delhi with 11 million inhabitants. Witnessing the fastest rate of an urbanization in the world, as per 2011 census, Delhi's population rose by 4.1%, Mumbai's by 3.1% and Kolkata's by 2% as per census 2011 compared to 2001 census. Estimated population at the current rate of growth by year 2015, Delhi stands at 26 million, Mumbai at 24 million, Kolkata at 16 million, Bangalore at 11 million, Chennai and Hyderabad at 10 million. Therefore, it has been noted that this fast tempo of growth of population in urban areas caused by movement from rural to urban and small to large ones are creating problems like urban congestion, poor housing, crowded transportation, lack of basic services, ill health, low educational status and unemployment. Such problems in the developed countries may become acute from its current state of being chronic. The Industrial Revolution in the 18th century caused countries like United States and England to become superpower nations, but the present condition is worsening. India's urban growth rate is 2.07%, which seems to be significant compared to Rwanda with 7.6%. India has around 300 million people living in metropolitan areas. This has greatly caused slum problems with so many people overcrowding cities and forcing people to live in unsafe conditions which also include illegal buildings. Water lines, roads and electricity are lacking, which is causing fall of living standards. It is also adding to the problem of all types of pollution. Urbanization also results in a disparity in the market, owing to the large demands of the growing population and the primary sector struggling to cope with them. It is therefore essential that a close tab be kept on the pattern of urbanization so that its adverse consequences could be minimized. Urban processes in India, a historical perspective. The genesis of the hierarchy of urban settlements and spatial structure in contemporary India can be traced to the development dynamics that prevailed during the colonial period, essentially in response to the requirements of an imperialist regime. The colonial economy generated strong commodity and population flows towards its key ports and administrative towns. This had the inevitable consequence of weakening the regional centripetal forces established during the period through the inter-settlement linkages and bidirectional movements of goods and services between the core and the periphery. The four major urban agglomerations of Calcutta, Madras, Bombay and Karachi served, unlike their western counterparts in the medieval period, as focal points of the mechanism for generating and extracting economic surplus. The pre-existing rural-urban interactions were gradually replaced by export-import oriented commodity flows. Movement of population that became necessary to sustain the new urban centers and the plantation fields further disrupted the core periphery relationship and strengthened the centrifugal forces. Unlike their counterparts in developed countries, the Indian agglomerations were not a product of economic development. The interactive system that had previously evolved through the centuries between a large number of handicraft, service and commerce-based towns and their hinterland of primary products, as well as between large cities and smaller towns in the hierarchy, was the major causality of this process of urbanization. A few of these towns were also inducted into the mechanism of surplus expropriation and became centers of collection and processing of primary goods, while the others were allowed to wither away. The new urban centers, endowed primarily with the instincts for trade, failed to disseminate impulses from balanced regional development. Instead, they acted as satellites of the port towns that were themselves satellitic to the global metropolis. The twin processes hitting hard at the economic base of the rural industries and creating enclaves of apparent influence in selected urban centers struck at the very root of the existing inter-settlement linkages and the synergies across different sizes of urban centers. Independence in 1947 brought political as well as economic structural change. Massive public sector investment in selected pockets, especially during the second and the third five-year plans, helped in the restructuring the urban hierarchy. However, regional disparities persisted. Despite the public sector playing a major role in directed concentrated investments towards backward areas, this is because the apex centers did not create a viable system of the urban settlements, as in many developed capitalistic economies, and left their hinterland virtually untouched. The assumption of percolation and diffusion of growth impulses from the center to the periphery, characteristic of the Anglo-Saxon regional developmental theories, proved to be invalid as the multiplier effects got impounded within the large agglomerations. The transformation of large cities from colonial to national capitalist meant only an increasing concentration of low productive manufacturing and service activities that could find a foothold more easily due to the changed political economy. The pace of urban growth was rapid during the first 3 decades after independence, but that led to greater informalization of urban economy and to growing deprivation in terms of basic services. The present lecture presents highlights of the urban scenario in India according to the census of 1991. It has been divided into 5 sections. The first one, levels and trends of urbanization in India, causes of growth of urbanization, growth of urban areas and distribution of population therein, metropolitan areas and the megacities, lastly megacities. Levels and trends of urbanization. As per the 1991 census of India, the following areas were classified as urban. Firstly, all places with a municipality, corporation, cantonment board or notified town area committee, etc. Secondly, all other places which satisfy the following criteria: a minimum population of 5,000, at least 75% of the male working population engaged in non-agricultural pursuits, and a density of the population of at least 400 persons per square kilometer. Thirdly, besides the major project colonies, areas of industrial development, railway colonies and important tourist centers were also treated as urban, though they might not fulfill the above criteria strictly. Urbanization therefore combines the criteria size of population, population density and social heterogeneity. The level of urbanization, percent of population living in urban areas in India was about 17.3% around independence 1951 and has increased to 25.7% in 1991. Therefore, though the urban population is increasing steadily, still India is predominantly a rural country whose 75% population is still living in rural areas. India thus is still a rural country when viewed against urbanization of the world or Asian and African countries. Coming to the major states of the country, the range of percent for the urban population varies from 8.7% for the hill state of Himachal Pradesh to 38.7% for Maharashtra, the most urbanized state. The remaining states have a much lower level of urbanization. One can clearly find this indicator highly correlated with the socio-economic level of the state. For instance, backward states of Bihar, Orissa, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh have the percentages of urban population of the order 13.2, 13.4, 19.9, 22.9 and 23.2 respectively, compared to about 26% for the country. Another feature of urbanization in India is its tempo, shown in column 3 of table 1. The rate of growth of the urban population showed an increasing trend till 1981, 2.34% per annum, during 1951 to 61 to 3.21 and 3.83 in the next 2 decades. 1991-71 and 1971 to 81, but the decade of 1981-91 of the population growth declined to 3.09 from 3.83 in the previous decade. This type of slowing down is noted in most of the major states of the country. Only the states of Himachal Pradesh and Kerala have reported accelerated figures in the tempo of urbanization, and there is no significant change in the tempo of Assam and Maharashtra in the last 2 decades. Table 3 shows the comparative level of annual growth rate of urban population by major states. The main causes of urbanization in India are: first, expansion in government services as a result of Second World War. Second, migration of people during the partition of India. Third, the Industrial Revolution. Fourth, 11th five-year plan that aimed at urbanization for economic development of India. Fifth, economic opportunities are just one reason people move into cities. Infrastructure facilities in the urban areas. Sixth, growth of private sector after 1990. Growth of urban areas and distribution of population therein. Since the growth of urban population is due to increase in population living in urban areas, natural increase or migration from rural to urban and accession of new towns or urban agglomerations to the category of urban areas. It is of interest to know how the latter dimension has been affecting the pattern of urbanization in India. Table 4, number of urban agglomerations, towns and percent distribution of size, class, percent distribution of urban agglomerations and towns by size. Table 4 gives trends in the number of towns which have increased from 1811 to 1901 to 3,609 in 1991, almost double the units in 90 years. Further, the increase has been slow till 1971 except for the year 1951 when an increase of 600 towns was reported. Also, the last 2 decades have added very large number of towns. Only about 10% of the urban population lives in cities with population of 10,000 or less. In other words, more and more of population is moving to large size cities, some from rural areas and some from the small sized cities. It is because of concentration of industries, commercial centers and the better infrastructural facilities in these cities. Its dual implications on the large size cities and the neglect of the small size cities have great relevance for overall social and economic development of the country. There is a need to assess the infrastructure development policies in the light of detrimental effects of this pattern of urban settlement. Issues and problems of urbanization in India. The total population of all type of urban centers, class to other cities, metropolises and urban agglomerations was 107 million in 1971, which increased to 156 million in 1981 and then 217 million in 1991. The level of urbanization therefore showed an increasing trend from 19.9% urban population in 1971 to 23.3% in 1981 and 25.7% in 1991, giving a gain of 3.4% during 1971-81 decade, but only 2.4% in 1981-91. This shows that the tempo of urbanization has slowed down in the last decade. The task force on urban development set up by the Planning Commission of India has projected population of the cities with the populations of 1 lakh and above as 150 million, while the actual count showed to be only 138.8 million. This slowing down of the growth rate of population has been noticed for other cities and smaller urban centers as well. This is matter of great concern because the stage of slowing down comes only when the urbanization reaches a sufficient high level, which is not true for India because even now 75% of the population has a rural base. Urbanization is also correlated with the number of urban areas. It was noticed that increase in urban areas has been almost double during the 90-year period. Urban areas which were 181 in 1901 have gone up to 309 in 1991. This increase was very slow till 1971, but the last 2 decades 1971-81 and 81-91 have added about 1/3 of the total urban areas. Another significant observation is that the growth of urban agglomerations and metropolises have been quite sharp. For example, the number of metropolitan cities increased from 12 in 1981 to 23 in 1991 and class cities with population of 1 lakh and above from 216 to 296. In terms of population living in different city sizes, the scenario is completely changed in 1991. The population distribution has become sharply skewed towards large size cities where about 66% of the population is living and only about 10% of the urban population lives in cities with population of 10,000 or less. The result is that the large cities are becoming problem cities or cities with all types of shortages, and the small cities are neglected cities. Both these settings have great relevance for the socio-economic development of the country. There is thus a genuine need to assess the policies of infrastructure development and of linkages between urban and rural areas and between small cities and metropolises and megacities for the overall and balanced development of the country. One more issue which emerged from the data on urbanization for the 1991 census is that the sex ratio, that is the number of males per 1,000 females, has shown an increasing trend. The larger the size of the city, the higher the sex ratio. In other words, there is a large male population in the metropolitan cities compared to the small cities and towns, and within the metropolitan areas, a larger male population has been noted for megacities. This observation again has a policy implication. In a study conducted by Bombay and Calcutta, it was found that these cities are under great pressure, whether it is housing, education, health, transportation or other utility services. Though master plans of megacities have included provisions for the rapidly projected population for such services, yet these are far too short. It is hoped that the 1991 census results will act as an eye-opener for further planning of developmental activities so as to decongest some of the urban areas and attach required priority to some of the neglected small urban units and centers. The time has come when medium-sized cities be developed in terms of infrastructure so as to curb the need for the people to go to megacities. Even for megacities, there is a need for developing satellite towns so that central cities can be decongested. Such policies will go a long way in the balanced socio-economic growth of the population. The conclusion: in view of the conflicting claims, an attempt is made here to assess the rates and patterns of urbanization and their implications for assessing urban resources and overall economic growth by analyzing urbanization trends and fractionalizing urban growth into various components at the macro level. the size class distribution of urban population and their growth rates over the decades and the interstate variation in the levels and growth in urban population highlights that the recent trend is a sharp departure from the past. An analysis of changes in the system of governance, particularly in the context of access to land and capital resources for urban centers in different size and functional categories, shows that large Indian cities, through physical planning controls on location of economic activities and urban land use imposed by way of master plans, laws and building bylaws, etc., have created rigidities in the functioning of the market, leading to fixation of uneconomic prices and emergence of suboptimal solutions, especially in large cities. Small cities, towns in most of the states are stagnated. They are experiencing low demographic and economic growth, increasing the distortions in settlement hierarchy inherited from the colonial period. The tragedy of a dual urban structure is reflected in the fact not many of these towns are able to attract investors from the national or world market and consequently attract little migration. Also, not many rural settlements transform themselves into vibrant urban centers. The share of agricultural income being significantly below its share in employment and the gap increasing over time are pointers to sectoral as well as spatial barriers to mobility. A dualism in urbanization is emerging. The process of urbanization has become exclusionary in nature. The cities and towns are facing the challenge of meeting the conflicting goals of catering to the demands of the global capital market on one hand and for providing access to employment, land and basic amenities to the local population on the other. An empirical perspective based on the growth in urbanization in India since 1901 suggests that a case can be made for providing special capital support to the less developed states that are not in a position to allocate requisite funds to their urban centers for development. Particularly, small and medium towns in such states need to be supported in their infrastructural projects as their economic bases are not strong to generate adequate revenues for the purpose. Finally, if the public agencies intervene only as active facilitator in the land, labor and capital market, removing its deficiencies and saving the actors from market failures, the process of exclusionary urban growth is likely to be strengthened in the future years. Urbanization would exhibit the same sluggish trend as in the past couple of decades. Developed states and large cities would receive most of the migrants recording reasonably high growth. A large section of the migrants, however, is likely to be absorbed in the degenerated peripheries or in marginalized land within the cities, causing serious problems of city segmentation. Less developed states, on the other hand, would exhibit a very low economic dynamism. The small and medium towns in these states are likely to experience serious problems due to infrastructural deficiency resulting in the absence of a livelihood. I sincerely hope this lecture proves to be an informative and enlightening lecture for all the viewers. Thank you.